Welcome to episode 48 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Ben Garwood. Hey,
Hello.
Ben.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for inviting me up here. I say up here, I do want to say the location and where we're recording today.
We met here actually when you were doing Stu's podcast, which is coming up. It's just been.
Yeah.
And so you actually got to see the place firsthand before we even sort of talked about doing a podcast.
It's true.
A chance encounter has led us to this.
Yeah. And where are we today?
So HR4K Hereford, in Herefordshire, in the middle of nowhere.
It's a good trek to get here.
It is a bit of a trek to get here. It's
and
one of the last bastions, I suppose, of Britain.
Exactly. And brief overview of this, because we will cover this at the end of your episode. But brief overview, how do you want to describe what this place is?
It's a community-focused networking hub. Brings good people together from different demographics, different backgrounds, with the opportunity to hopefully create employment opportunities and some good things fall out of it.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
kind of
And it's got good coffee.
Great
Great coffee. And there's some cool things. So I tried to capture the stuff when I set up the cameras, but we got bikes, Harleys, and loads of cool things. So if you haven't seen it, jump on YouTube, check it out. At the beginning of every episode, Ben, we do have the 4 questions, which are the bullet points of hopefully what we're going to hear from your time in the military. So I'll give you them in pairs. I'm going to go for pairs, all right, not all 4.
Okay.
So the first 2 questions are, when did you join the military and what service and branch did you join?
Okay, so I joined in 1997 and I joined the Army. I initially wanted to be in the Marines, but I joined the Paras, so I joined the Army.
Okay.
In 1997.
1997.
I suppose I finished depot in September 97.
Okay, awesome. So we'll hear what your career, what paths it went down, let's say, because this is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you, because you jumped to different areas in the military. Randomly, yeah. The other 2 questions are, how long did you serve for and what rank did you get to?
I served for 23 years and I finished as a staff sergeant. So
Awesome.
I actually kind of had 2 rank career paths, but finished as a staff sergeant.
Brilliant. We'll hear about why you had 2 career paths. But brilliant. So Ben, let's rewind the clock. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in a place called St Ozzle in Cornwall. My old man and my mum, they met each other working in hospitals. And before my old man joined the army, a few years later. But I was born in St Austell.
Nice. And then how was growing up? Was that pretty easy for you, or was it hard?
I was actually very lucky. I had a great family. I had very caring parents. I had great brothers. I couldn't have asked for a better upbringing. My old man's very much into the stuff that I like. I got into obviously through my old man. So shooting, fishing, hunting, bit of fizz. That was great. And I had just an amazing mum. So I never had this sort of story of hardship and hard knocks. I had a great life. And that's the sort of thing I want to carry on with my kids as well.
That's cool. So did your parents or grandparents or anybody like that, were they in the military at all?
Yeah, so my grandfather, he was in the Ulster Rifles. He was in the gliders in the Ulster Rifles. Not when I was young. He'd left well before that. He was in the Second World War. My father didn't join the army till I was probably about 4 or 5.
Okay.
Is when he joined. So I suppose that's when you start absorbing those influences.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
And he joined, from his medical background, he joined the REMC, Royal Army Medical Corps.
Nice. And so at what point did you think, I'm going to follow in their footsteps, I'm going to join the military?
So I went to a military school called Duke of York's Royal Military School in Dover. So because my old man was moving around a lot, they wanted a bit of security and a bit of consistency in my life. My 2 brothers went to a boarding school because, as you know, the military pays subsidise or did subsidise school fees. They went to a school called Gordon Boys, which again was a military affiliated school. And then I went to a school called Duke of York's Royal Military School, which is down in Dover. So while I was there, my best mate, as we were sort of going through school, joined the Paras, or was going to join the Paras, a guy called Ian Clark. And I was like, well, I'm going to be a Royal Marine. So I'll be a Royal Marine. you'll be a para, and that's what we're gonna. And that's as far as we kind of really thought about it.
Okay. What was it about the Marines that enticed you?
I think at the time, because I was quite an outdoorsy guy, and you know, I like my shooting, my fishing, my survival, and all those things. The way the Royal Marines, as you know, the Royal Marines have got the best PR ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes up for a lot of other things that Royal Marines don't have. And they've got an amazing PR. So I think I was very much sold on that. And I had the books, and I was reading all the stuff that you do on the commando course, and it just seemed like what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about what happened when you came to join the military.
Well, to be fair, I left school at 16. I was, as always, my head's in the clouds. I'm always looking for something else. Something flies past the window. I'm more interested in that than I actually am sort of getting my head down and doing anything academic. My parents were like, enough's enough. We've wasted thousands of pounds on your education. They were amazing, and they were amazing parents, and they worked 2 jobs just to send me and my brothers to school. Yet it came to a point where I probably needed something else. I got out, and I was really lucky. I got to really enjoy being a late teenager, you know, from between the age of 16 and 19. I got out, I applied for art college. I've always liked art. And I did the classics. I went to the festivals, all the gigs. You know, I started becoming a bit of an indie kid, you know, a little rock kid. And I made the most of being a teenager. Okay. Everything you should do as a teenager, I did as a teenager. And that's right, you know. And I think it got to a point where I realized that I was always going to be, you know, doing jobs like being a labourer, or was always going to be packing boxes. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs, but I couldn't see myself sustaining that job. And I just went to the careers office and said, look, you know, I'm thinking about joining the military. And I initially applied for the Royal Marines, as I said I would. But actually, they took one look at me. Actually, I apologise. The colour sergeant that was in there, he was great. We did the chin-ups, we did all the things, we did the tests. Had no dramas whatsoever. My old man then said, look, I'll help you get fit. That night, we went and did a load of fizz, went back down the careers office the next day to have an interview with a Navy officer. And he just said, look, I'm sorry, son, I just don't think you're built for joining the Marines. I just don't think you're physically mature enough. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cancel your application.
Okay.
I said, look, let me do the chin-ups. You know, let me do whatever I have to do. I did the chin-ups. I still banged out like 10 chin-ups. But again, he just wasn't satisfied. No, it was a struggle because obviously I was doing the fizz the night before with the old man. So I said, I sod it. I went next door to the careers office next door. And, just said, look, I want to join the paras. And I think it was a local careers officer who said, well, have you thought of joining the artillery? You could be a para in the artillery. I was like, no. Appreciated, but no. And then I had a Royal Anglian, because it was we're up in Lincolnshire at the time. So he was like, you know, what about joining the Royal Anglians? And I was like, nah, the paras, that's what I want to be. So they just said, look, you know, okay, we do a BFT here down by the beach down at Mablethorpe or somewhere like that it was, or Cleethorpes or something. I can't remember, near Grimsby. And see how you get on. And then if you do it right, we'll send you. And I turned up. I'm lucky I was fit, you know. Turned up, been a little cocky little shit, and had a cigarette in my hand and a bite of an apple. I was good to go, and I smashed it. Smashed this the recruiting office staff guy that was there. And from there I went. He was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll let you go."
Nice.
And that was it. I joined the paras, and the world of pain started.
The world of pain started. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm wearing this hoodie today. This
Thank
colour.
you. I appreciate
just to, you know.
Yeah.
Tip the hat.
The blood clot is good. Well, actually, you and I touched on something just a second before we started this was, you had an injury with your hips, and obviously that stemmed from being very young, being at 16 years of age. I joined the paras. I was probably physically not as mature as some of the other guys that were applying at the same time. I did struggle. It took me a while towards the back end of depot before I was fairly confident and fairly strong on P Company, and I had a good, strong P Company, to be fair. But I can absolutely see throughout my career that actually bodies, you are going in there, you're still a child to a certain extent, an adolescent. You've got that amount of weight, that amount of stress. All of that's being put on you at that age. It's a lot to put on you.
Yeah.
I know kids and young men have been fighting in wars for thousands of years. But the fact of the matter is we're still growing at that stage. So depot isn't easy.
And what age were you then?
19.
You were 19 then?
Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah, so still a teenager, technically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
And you know, and I'll be honest with you, I really struggled with the tabbing. You know, I held my own as you do, but I didn't find it easy because a lot of guys, as you know, I'm short. So a lot of guys were, got great big strides. It was hard to keep up. I had to build my anaerobic fitness up to be able to keep up with them. And then after a while, I found my own, and I was okay.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on you and I think also certainly Power Age Depot. There's obviously a big thing on there. It's all about fitness. It's robustness. We call it reducation.
Yeah.
It's cheeky.
Cheeky.
Yeah. I would say though, I'm glad of those 3 years before I joined the army. I'm glad of those 3 years from 16 leaving essentially an institution, which was school.
Yeah.
And then joining the army 3 years later. I think for some guys who leave school at 16, join in, they've never really experienced anything in the world. So I'm actually glad of that, and I think it really opened my eyes out and made it easier to make friends and find common ground with other people within depot and then eventually battalion.
Yeah, and I think people ask me, would you do it again? Absolutely. I love military life and I'd go back tomorrow, but the thing that I would change is I'd wait till I was 18 at least, a bit older, and get a bit of experience there. So yeah, I wouldn't have joined at 16.
No.
But going back to your training, we'll accumulate it all together. So I guess basic training, then the P company and all of that. Is there anything that stood out to you that you were like, didn't know this was here, or wow, I smashed it?
I think, obviously there was no comparison because I was going Power Age Depot, so I didn't see what the other depots were like. I didn't know what their standards were like. All I knew was the standards that were being set by the depot screws and the P company staff. And there is a massive ethos within the paras. There's a massive amount of pride and there are solid standards within that. And I'm very grateful that I chose that path. I think by understanding those standards and seeing those standards, that you were able to see them as goals and things to set yourself against. It was hard because essentially you're taking a boy, straight out of Civvy Street into putting kit on, heavy weights. Obviously the reeducation, as you know, that was going on in the block.
Yeah.
If you fucked up. And all of that comes to conditioning and resilience, because ultimately at the end of it, they're trying to create something that's prepared to go to battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But like yourself, if I was to give them the chance again, knowing what I know now, I probably would have gone reserves.
Okay.
And then chosen the path through reserves. At the time, I remember sort of laughing at the reserves, as they were like, Saturdays and Sundays. Yeah, all that sort of shit. And I never really took them seriously, and I really regret that now. I think actually looking at the reserves, there is an amazing pool of individuals that come together because they want to do something interesting and exciting. And there's actually a very high caliber of soldiers within the reserves. Often played down by what is essentially over years became a gentleman's drinking club for people to turn up on a Wednesday on a drill night. And often they put down some of the young thrusters who wanted to do well. But I've seen some of the best soldiers I've ever known in my life have come from a reserve background. If I could have my time again, I probably would have been reserve. I don't know if I would have had the same ethos and the same outlook, but I certainly think it would have allowed me to probably expand more on me, a chance to do other things, as opposed to that institution.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. And someone out here or listening to this out there might pick up on that, so that's cool. I do always ask this question, though, for anybody that's gone through the jumps aspect. How did you find that? Because I'm guessing you'd never jumped from a plane before.
No. So a friend of mine, I won't say his name because he's still in, and he's actually up the road here. So I was number one in the door for my first jump.
First jump?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I knew about jumping because my old man actually went airborne within the medics. And I knew about jumping. And but I remember just being on that tailgate when it went down, and my mate was stood behind me, and he said he could see the whole of my body physically shaking, stood in the door. But like many things I've been in, you know, when you've been in positions where sometimes it's nice to be the first and just get it out the way, rather than anticipation of seeing someone else go and then it's waiting for your turn. But yeah, it was mega.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think, again, that's something that's quite nice about the Paras compared to some of the other local infantry regiments. It's something that defines you, being able to be able to parachute into battle. Granted, it's not always used, and that's often because we haven't got a government that's prepared to actually sign it off, or a military with enough balls to actually. But as a delivery capability, second to none.
Yeah.
It's epic. It's the fastest way to get guys and girls onto the ground. So it should never be cancelled. But to have that as your delivery method, as your insertion method, that's something to rally behind. That's something, and it has done if you look across everywhere from all different airborne units, they're all wearing a maroon lid. You know, there's an airborne brotherhood that's across you don't have that with tankies, really. You don't have that with any other unit.
It's true.
There's something about being airborne. And even Fallschirmjäger, German paratroopers had a respect for British paratroopers, and British paratroopers had a respect for German paratroopers, because there's something you've all done together, which is essentially, you know, fucking jump into the abyss, you know, leap.
And hope that the parachute works. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously you're then on the ground and you've got to do the biz, and that's what sets you apart.
Mm. So you go to your first unit. Where do you go to?
So I went to 2 para. So my best mate, as I said, he was at school. He was 3 para. I asked to go to 3 para. And when they were handing out the lanyards, so there's red, blue, and green. So red was 1 para, blue 2, and green 3 para. I wanted a green one. I wanted to go 3 para, where my mate was. And it just was easy at the end for them just to go, you're going to 2 para, because everyone went to 2 para, which is cool, and I don't regret that at all. So I went to 2 para, and I remember the night we turned up. Well, the night before, we all got taken into the drying room one by one, except me.
Okay.
And for a final filling in by the depot screws in the final regication that we had, and except me. And the reason why I didn't is because one of the depot screws, who was a prick, to be fair,
Right.
he came into our room the night before, dragged me out of my bed, headbutted me, punched me in the neck. He was half cut, or drunk. And he was just a bully. That's what he was. I stood there. I took this fucking headbutt to the face and a punch to the throat. I was the shortest, the littlest guy in the room. That's the sort of person he is. But this whole idea of you just taking it as a good Joe, as a good, Tom. Anyway, next morning, he took me to one side. He was like, "You don't like me, do you, Garwood?" I was like, "No, I don't like you." And as I said that, my platoon sergeant, a guy called Steve Evans, walked past and he just nodded, and then went in. And he was like, "It's good to see a Joe with a bit of bollocks."
Yeah.
And he grabbed hold of this shitbag.
Yeah.
And he says, "You touch Garwood again, I'll break your fucking legs." And anyway, they were shitbags, and they got us all lined up. So we just finished P Company. We'd finished our jobs. We'd done the pass-off parade that we weren't even allowed our own family to our pass-off parade. It was mental. We did a pass-off parade for ourselves. And then we had about an hour before we were then, heading down to the train station or getting picked up or whatever. And they got us all in the corridor. Said, "Right, one of you here's been looked after, but you'll get your comeuppance." And what they wanted us to do was that they wanted us. This is just 2 individuals. This isn't Depot Para. This is 2 individuals who ruined it, And what they wanted us to do was pay them give them some money to say, I don't know, or a gift or something. And a guy called Alan McMenemy, who's sadly dead now. He was one of the guys who was kidnapped in Iraq a few years ago. And he was like, "Everyone, don't give him a penny. Don't give him a penny." And so what they did is they took everyone in the drying room and obviously gave everyone except me.
Okay.
So they said, right, you'll get your comeuppance when you get to battalion. So we turned up at battalion a day or two later, and we go on this thing called the South Downs March. It was the first time we're all now in this new D company. We've got a sergeant major who's a legend called Scout Scott. There's guys there that Falkland vets. We've got a full screw called Mick Davis, who I've got so much respect for, and a senior Tom called Broggy. And they took us on this South Downs March. And we finished it, we're all bashing up in the woods at the end. And they went, right, all you new guys, all you Joes, get here. I was like, oh, fuck. They got us in a line in this wood block. Shone this fucking torch. And again, it goes back to that. I was more pissed off I wasn't number one than I was number two, because I didn't want to hear him get a dig and then wait for my dig. And then, so Mick Davis was like, right, we've been warned off about a few of you, stand by. And then he just went, it stops here. No one's touching you. If you guys fuck up, then I'll deal with you. But until then, no one touches you. And that was it. It was mega. And then, we'd already earned our place to be there.
Yeah.
This was clearly two little shitbags who, there's two reasons you go to depot. You're either very good or they're trying to get you out of battalion. And that's what happened to these two.
Okay.
Sadly, I never saw them again. But I'm not sad, because they're a fucking pair of...
Yeah.
Obvious. And and then after that, it was the whole, but that was the days where we weren't really on tour. It was like, 1997, I think the first thing that came off was maybe Kosovo a few years later. So we had to earn our right to be in battalion. We had to earn the right to have like jungles and alley kit. You had to earn the right to have you bury a certain way and everything else. And I loved that. It made you had to speak to your senior Tom to see if you can get your tattoo done, Excuse me. And it gave you your place to be there. That obviously came with some problematic things, as you can imagine. People taking advantage of that. Some guys taking reeducation too far. And I wouldn't ever say there was bullying. Mm-hmm. And even that one case that was in depot that I had, that wasn't bullying. That was just a gobshite, But in battalion, it wasn't bullying. It was... I don't know, it was rite of passage to a certain extent, and again, it comes back to that conditioning and resilience and everything else. And we need them as men, as humans. We need to know where we sit in society and how we deal with these problems. And eventually you find your place and you get respected amongst your peers. You see how you do, and you sink and you swim. And I think that's right for organisations like the Paras to have that, because ultimately when the shit hits the fan, look at every single conflict. It's the Paras that have gone in every single time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marines following in behind. But generally it's the Paras. Yeah. Because they know when the shit hits the fan, if you need something doing, you need a bunch of idiots that are prepared to do that. And I think that comes from that. Mm-hmm. Bullying, though, I remember a couple of guys who did something that was out of order to one of the lads, and it was almost like a night of the long knives. I remember just doors getting kicked in, screaming. I was like, that's how it's dealt with. You don't bully. You can't take it too far. And I remember seeing them on the parade square the next morning, black eyes. Sergeant Major was going, well, what happened to you? Oh, I was fighting downtown. Good lad. What happened to you? Fighting downtown. Good lad. Yeah. When actually what was happening was...
Yeah. He's aware.
He's aware. And it was dealt with. I loved Pareg, but nothing was happening.
Okay. So how long was you at 2 Para?
Just short of 3 years.
3 years.
And... as I said, nothing was happening. We weren't going anywhere. And a lot of my friends, I became friends with a lot of guys from different units. Obviously, I knew a lot of the medics from my old man's background, became friends with engineers who were there, and the signals, and lots of other guys. And I think going to my point where I'd lived a little before I joined, and then I wasn't really an institution type person. I made an effort to get to know people across the brigade. Not much made an effort. I gave people the time of day. I spoke to people. I engaged with people. I'd see them on the piss, shoot the shit. rather than just sort of sticking in your little blood clot. And I found it great. I mean, if I ever needed anything, I knew where I was going. And now it allowed me to understand what is available and what is available to you as a soldier amongst the brigade. I went back to Tubra a little while ago, and I was talking to a guy who had no understanding. He's an LE, had no understanding of what assets and what capabilities are available to him at any time amongst the brigade, because he's been so institutionalized into that one particular unit. This is an LE. I knew that as a Tom.
Yeah.
Because
which is late entry officer, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just for anybody listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, so he's done his time. He's been there for years. But what he is, he's just been a good soldier, done exactly as told, and that's it. Where actually, if you actually understand what's available to you on the Orbat, then the world's your oyster. You know, you can call in anything from fires to equipment to med to whatever. And I just found that I had a great run. As you know, I get to know these people. I was looked after. If we missed a meal, I could always go to another cookhouse, and there'd be someone, "Hey Ben, how you doing? You know, steak and chips, whatever." You know, it was fucking brilliant. To me, the word crap at, or the two words crap at, was always a descriptive word as opposed to a vindictive, a facetious word. It was always, I always used it as a descriptor, just to separate us from someone else, to see who you're talking about. I'd never, same as up the road here, we used to call people screamers. It was always just a way of separating who you are talking about. But the caliber and the ethos of those individuals often shared. But it's a bit of banter. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of, it's when people hide behind those words, it's clearly there's a deficiency in themselves, is why they hide behind these. So actually getting to know the people in the brigade and understanding more about them and finding out that many of them are very similar to myself really opened up some doors. So I got to a point, only within 3 years, I was like, I need something more. I need something challenging. So I asked to transfer to the REME.
Okay.
I don't really know why.
I was going to ask why, but
I don't know. I think it was, I needed to be, I think maybe, as I said, when I was younger, and the fact that I went to art college or tried going to art college and everything else, I think I need to be creative. And I thought that was something that I could do that's creative. Actually, the REME lads I met then, they were the best on the piss. They were always going on the piss. I remember they had a red light and a green light on one of their accommodation blocks with a cable so people could jump out the window and parachute out the window, you know, just for shits and giggles on the piss. These guys were having the best time. They had their career. They had ethos, in some cases better than we had in the Parachute Regiment, because we already accept we're Parachute Regiment, where these guys are coming in from corps, doing P Company, and now being very proud of their new identity. Their identity is more important than the cap badge, where for us, the identity is the cap badge. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
And obviously it makes them feel more, I think the ethos is great for them because it's a smaller collective. You know, does that make sense? And so anyway, I transferred the REME. I started at the end of 1999, 2000, went to REME Depot. And I was obviously going to Depot there as a guy that's already been in the regular army for 3 years. I was a gobshite.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in my early 20s. I was a fucking rock star. You know, I was going on the piss. I remember turning up when they opened up the new NAFI. I had a pair of underpants with a set of wings sewn on them and a mess tin. I turned up parade once, you know, just with my shotgun on the shoulder, just because I was going to take my shotgun out for the day. He was just cutting your own detail. I played rugby near enough 5 days a week down there. I used to work behind the bar in the rugby club, and I was just living the best life, you know, on the piss, playing rugby, just doing cool shit, heading up to London to the church, you know, the church, the backpackers and the church up in London, there most weekends. I don't think it was ever about joining the REME.
Okay.
It was just about enjoying being young and having a regular income and a roof over your head, you know?
Did you go for a particular trade when you did that?
Yeah, I became applied to be a vehicle mechanic.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, so while I was there, I met a guy called Joe Stevenson and a lad called Peter Simpson, and a few other lads as well. And these guys eventually became my best friends. So I met a guy called Ginge Hunter. Ginge Corner, then he said that. He was actually a guy that got done for being a nonce in two-para. Ginge Hunter and Tony, loads of other people. And we met them when I was at Borden, and they were going through trade training or whatever. And it's interesting that these people I met at that point in my life have now become my longest friends. Even though I've gone to different things and done different stuff, they've stayed the best friends. And so I met this guy day one turning up, and this young lad said, "Oh, I'll show you around." My dad was in the paras. I was like, "Cool." He says, "My dad was in one para." So I'm two para, I'm looking to transfer. And we became great friends. Eventually he did P Company while he was there, because you could do, or he did P Company eventually, and you could do this SF fitness course while you're down at the REME depot for the guys who want to go commando or para while they're there. And then, you build these friendships up, and we're going to each other's houses and all this sort of stuff. And by the end of it, I eventually became my brother-in-law.
Okay.
So my poor wife, going back slightly, Joe transferred to 3-para. He would transfer from the REME to Para Edge. So he went to 3-para. So my wife then had a brother in 3-para, a dad who was 1-para, and a husband who was 2-para. Poor girl didn't stand a chance. But yeah, it's what I'm getting at is if you think about those times where you're like 21 to 23, very, very little responsibility. You get to do everything you want to do. That is the best time in your life. That's where you make your best friends. That's where you make your best memories and all those bits and pieces. Mm-hmm. And I don't regret the REME whatsoever. So, I then eventually went to a REME battalion. I went to an airborne REME battalion up in Colchester, and I didn't stay very long. I did 2 years in the REME before transferring back to 2-para. But I have no regrets for joining the REME. I'm very grateful. If I hadn't joined the REME, I wouldn't have met my best friends. I wouldn't have met my wife. So, that 2 years was worth it.
Did you go away with the REME, or was it
always... No, actually I wasn't very particularly popular with my head shed at the REME.
Okay.
Because I just kept cutting my own detail. Sadly, when I joined the REME, it was just a 16 brigade was starting, and the ethos of 5 Airborne Brigade we'd lost it. And the reason why we'd lost it, because essentially Glasgow was creating this new unit, 16 Air Assault Brigade, and we're having guys and girls being posted in brigade who weren't interested in being airborne or being air assault or anything else. They were getting posted because they probably had a boyfriend or a girlfriend in Clangton. All the guys and girls who had the experience of, light detachment, REME stuff, or field hospitals for the med, the airborne engineers, all of this stuff was being lost because Glasgow, in their wisdom, which Glasgow is basically how they man the army, and it's the administration side. Most of it's made up of civilians who have no understanding what's going on anyway, or it's made up of LEs LEs and officers who probably aren't good enough to be in their own battalions, so they get posted up to Glasgow. So the decisions are being made on who should be posted in and posted out by people who've got no understanding. It was just destroying this new exciting brigade, which is 16 Air Assault Brigade. And all of that experience and knowledge was being lost, and that ethos at that time was really, really suffering. I liked the fact that it was a lot of us, certainly my age group, we had a bar there called the Fat Albert, which is named after Hercules. We were going out in our maroon T-shirts. We were doing toga nights. We were doing all these sort of things that we know is great for ethos. But our head shed, they weren't airborne. They were getting posted in from all kinds of random places. They had no interest in being airborne or even running it as an airborne unit. And there was a bit of animosity because they weren't, quite honestly. Yet when the shit hit the fan, as I said before, and they needed people, who did they rely on? They relied on all the airborne lads. But, I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed the opportunity to think for yourself and problem solve out on the ground. But what I didn't like was the day-to-day working in a workshop, fitting, taking one lump off a vehicle, swapping for another lump. It drove me mad. Okay. Absolutely drove me mad. And I think the only thing that kept me sane was the people around me. So I asked to transfer back to 2 Para. 2 Para were going on tour at the time to Northern Ireland. And I asked to go on tour, and the REME were like, absolutely, get the fuck out of it. And so I transferred back. I was back within 2 weeks.
Right.
And it was just a paper trail then just to get my cap badge. So I went back to the same battalion, same company, same platoon, same section, pretty much.
Okay. And was you in contact with them whilst you were in REME for those 2 years?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are all my mates.
Right.
And many of them I had followed up here or had come here at the same time to Hereford. So yeah, it was still the same bunch. Okay. Colchester's amazing. Well, it was. Colchester was, everyone was on the piss. Those many times a week, and we'd all be in the same bars. And it was exactly, Colchester became exactly what it should have been in Aldershot, where everyone was mixing with lots of people and from different units, and everyone was getting on.
Yeah.
And I think my generation, and I'm seeing it now, we've got friends in other battalions, other units. We weren't that blood clot where you just work with Para-Edge guys and no one else. My generation have got our best friends are in different corps and different organisations, because we know that's how it works. And actually, we have often a lot more in common with these people than we give them credit. So I transferred back, and I got called a crap at by my Para-Edge mates, because obviously I was REME transferring, and I got called a failed crap at by my REME mates, and I couldn't win.
Right.
But what was then, I was now 3 years behind my peer group. So my peer group are now my lance corporals and corporals, and I'm now a Tom. So I had to work double hard to try and get that back up, and I was now on my back foot within my career. Not that my career was ever very important to me. But
those 5 years you were, is it a trooper? No, it's not.
Tom. It's
Tom.
a private.
A private,
yeah.
Okay. And then
craftsman REME.
In REME, and then you back to being a...
Yeah.
Okay,
back to being a private again.
Yeah.
So I've lost, essentially, well, I'm 5 year deficit. I'm 5 year in the rear to a certain extent for the career path. So a lot of guys, as I said, who were even junior to me, who had joined Para-Edge just after I left, were now lance corporals with more responsibility than I had. I think because of my age and my knowledge, and the fact that my experience within the REME as well, which allowed me to sort of have a better understanding of how the army works, I was given a lot of responsibility. I became a multiple commander, which is eight guys. So I was a multiple commander as a private soldier. I was flick-flacking between a section 2 IC and a section commander as a private soldier.
Okay.
I think I wasn't a bad soldier. I was okay. I mean, I did the biz, and I worked hard, and I was lucky. I've always had good people around me. I made sure of that, because that's what you do.
You mentioned about them going out to Northern Ireland. Was that your first tour then in your career?
No, second.
It was
Sorry.
your second.
So I went on tour when I first joined the Paras, and it was the end of that tour when I transferred.
Right. Where was that? Was that Kosovo that you mentioned?
No, that was like Northern Ireland.
That was Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah, and then when we went on the second island tour was when Iraq kicked off, the 2003 Iraq tour.
Okay.
Sadly, 2 Para were stuck in Northern Ireland, so we didn't deploy. 1 Para went, 3 Para went. So we were kind of, it was gutting.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm just transferred back again. I want to be here. I want to get back on these tours, and I'm missing out on it. So 2 Para had already gone in those 2 years. Excuse me. To Afghanistan. A lot of it was staggering on airfields. It wasn't particularly interesting, but it was still a tour. Sierra Leone, obviously where 1 Para and the SAS had a good run on Sierra Leone. That was pretty quiet for the brigade, bar Pathfinders at the time. But they were still experiences. They were still things, still getting out. And I missed all that, or missed the opportunity for that. So that's why one of the big reasons for transferring back. So I transferred back, and then went straight on a Northern Ireland tour. It was a bit crap. and then watching everyone out, going away to Iraq and that sort of stuff. And then for us, by the time we came back from Iraq, it was straight into the run of the mill of those Herrics, not Herrics, whatever they were. The old Iraq tours.
Telex, is that?
Telex, sorry, well done. Yeah, the Telex. And then that between Grand Prix exercises in Kenya, and it was the normal sort of run of the mill.
Okay.
They were great for cutting my teeth and allowing me more responsibility and then get on my promotion courses, but I still needed something else. I say this quite a lot when I speak to people, is I always needed to be at the table. I always needed to feel like I craved responsibility. I craved the opportunity to use my ideas and people listen to me. Even if it's not right, but still I want to be involved in the estimate. I want to be involved in what we're doing. And I think unless you put yourself there, often you're being dictated to, because that's how the army works, by someone who's either got less experience than you, an idiot, or if you're lucky enough, you've got someone good who can be your leader. I had some terrible commanders. I had some sergeants that were weak, so they didn't protect us from the platoon commanders. I had some sergeants who were shite and too busy kissing ass. And I had Ruperts who just had zero experience, but because of the class they believe they have and the position they're in, they believe that they know better than you. And you're now 6 years in being a paratrooper, being told what to do by a Rupert that's done 6 months.
And Rupert, for anybody, is it's a nickname for
an officer,
new
young
officers.
officer. So it's really frustrating. And I went on tour in 2005, which was the first time we Two-Power had lost anyone for many, many years. And we went to, it was another Iraq tour. We went to Alamara. We lost Lee Ellis and Rich Holmes, officer, one of the best officers I've ever known. He was one of those officers that always ask you how you are. Christmas, he'd stag on for you. He'd always welcome you when you came back off leave. He was just an all-round good bloke, and sadly we lost him. We also lost Lee Ellis. Lee Ellis, a young Tom of mine, he went out on tour sick. He was injured, and actually he did a lot of his rehabilitation while he was out on tour doing shit jobs like checking people had washed their hands in the cookhouse. All those crap jobs you do as company runner for an incompetent sergeant major that we had at the time. He was just a good dude. And he got himself fit again. I said, look, mate, I want you as my lead scout. That's what I'd like you to be. I think you've earned it. The lead scout we had at the time wasn't very good. Lead scout was as a position in your patrol that I think is a position of responsibility and should be a privilege for someone who understands ground atmospherics, and I always think it's a great gift to give someone as a position of responsibility like the lead scout. And he was wicked. He was absolutely brilliant. I went away on leave, and I came back and I'd lost my multiple because it was under command of someone else. I ended up doing another job, and my lads went out on the ground, and but they were both killed with a shape charge, passive infrared, sort of PIR sensor shape charge, and that was the first time we lost anyone. We had a Rupert at the time, an officer who was, as I said, just as incompetent as the sergeant major that we had. But this guy he had his head in the clouds. Absolute space cadet. And I remember the OC, a guy called Chris Titcombe, an amazing man. I really, really respected this OC. He said, look, he got me down from the accommodation block. He said, Ben, I'd like you to take the first patrol out since we've lost the two lads. I was like, okay, that's a big task. The first time Two-Power had ever lost anyone. He says, like, I don't want you to take a multiple. I just want you to take whoever wants to go on this first one. This has hit us really hard the first time we've lost anyone. And a lot of these guys, some of them were related, some of them went to school together, which is bit strange for a Parachute battalion because we often recruit from all over the place. So I went up to the block, or the tents, and I said, look, guys, we need to go on a patrol. We've got to show force back out on the ground. Who wants to come? And what was amazing to see was all of Lee's best mates, all of his best mates put their hand up. Mm. And they went, yeah, we're going. And there was guys there who weren't on those jobs. And they were carrying, not carrying, they didn't want to go. Yeah, they were making excuses. If they said, look, do you know what, I'm not up for it. I'm hit quite bad from this. I get it. I respect that. You know, you can't help how you feel. But to make excuses, that's cowardice. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And that's what they did. A couple of people made excuses where his best friends, the guys he went to school with, people he knew, they were like, I'm going on this ground. And they did. It was such a privilege to be on the ground with these guys. And they were being taunted by the locals because, you know, they'd obviously had a bit of success. The locals had a success. Josh Armadi, I think it was. And these guys were just steadfast. Absolutely rock stars. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, some really good guys. I appreciate Chris Titcombe, the OC, for giving that opportunity. And I think it was a great testament to the mettle of a paratrooper, of Lee Ellis's guys, to then say, yeah, I want to be on this. Yeah. I thought that was wicked. You got to remember, this is really before some serious kinetic fighting. I think the most kinetic we'd seen is one para in is it Almac? Just before that, one para involved in a big tussle after the RMPs who were murdered, if you remember that. And then I think PWR involved in the Civic Building? Something that they were involved in something. So really, these were more like, you know, small pocket fighting. They weren't all out war. You know, we hadn't experienced this. So even losing two guys on something like that was massively effective. Affected the guys. I end up working with some SAS guys at the end of that tour. A patrol was selected, a composite patrol was selected of a load of guys from 2 Para to go and work with the SAS. And it was kind of a precursor to SSgt. And the idea is we were going to go out and support and sponsor some of their cordons while they go and do some of their taskings. And it was a great opportunity for me to see SF, you know, to see how they work and how they plan and how they do things. And straight off the back of that, I was like, right, I'm going on selection.
You got the bug? Yeah,
it was just, again, it was that responsibility, the fact that you were able to dictate what you do. Mm-hmm. I always tried to do that within my platoon and in my sections. I used to, when we had downtime, I'd always take the guys out on, we'd go and patrol around the ISO containers if we had some downtime to practice mutually supporting each other, to get that ingrained in us that we'd always have each other's backs. And it became seamless. It was so slick eventually how we could do that. We would always try and do alternative training to keep ourselves going. We'd always look at alternative, not targeting, but different patrolling and different routes. And all these things, they were never the responsibility. They were never enough for me, but it was still something that made me feel like I was involved.
Yeah.
To then go and work with the SAS was wicked. It was just such an amazing, it was big boys rules, you know, like, right, okay, downtime's downtime, work's work. Here's the perks, some pretty good perks. And you were treated like an adult. After that tour, I went on selection, but I just wasn't good enough.
Okay, so just on that, what year is this?
2005.
2005. What rank are you?
Corporal.
Corporal.
Yeah.
And you'd been in for, what was that, like 7 years, 8 years?
8 years.
8 years?
Yeah.
Good time to go for selection?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm missing a little bit here. I did actually apply for selection before when foot and mouth was on back in 2000, 2001. Again, going back to that point of where my body just wasn't physically mature enough or wasn't ready, that it didn't have that ingrained endurance.
What enticed you to try then?
Again, to do something different.
Something different,
It was
okay.
kind of cool. I think every boy, certainly the way I think is every boy probably should look at something like that or attempt that.
Okay.
I mean, even as a kid, I remember always just wanting to be in the SAS or in Special Forces. Never really thought much of it, but just always thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went back on selection in 2005, and again, I just hadn't trained well enough. I hadn't done enough preparation. I'd been on tour. We'd been quite confined to a small camp. And it was my fault. I just didn't put the training in. I quickly applied then to go and join a unit called the Pathfinders, which is 16 air assaults brigade recce force. I went on that in 2007.
Okay.
And successful. I loved it. This was now an opportunity, still within the Green Army, but to have responsibility, to have a seat at the table, to be treated as an adult. Now I know why the army works. I'm not that naive. The army's designed essentially to take Joe Bloggs off the streets and get him to go blindly into battle. He needs structure. He needs everything around him. I get how it works, and if you want to go deeper than that, we can talk about class systems and false class systems and everything else and how that works. But I get that you need those guys, that green element. But there are many people like me who need something extra. They need to be directly involved in something. And I think that's what the Pathfinders gave me. It gave me a chance to, I'm now working directly at brigade head shed level, where before I was lucky if I got past my platoon commander, maybe might chat to the OC.
Okay.
So now you're looking at planning, you're making decisions or influencing decision making that goes all the way up to, brigade plus level. That's fucking cool.